So, yeah, in all of this advocacy work that these third-party advocacy groups are doing, I think, there's a couple of things that we have to be careful with, and one of them is the allies on the other side, right? I think this continual concentration on just our groups and our needs doesn't help build that allyship. And I'm not just talking about white people, but I'm talking about, in our case, other groups like indigenous groups, LGBTQ, other people that are dealing just as much with the bigotry and hatred that's happening, across the world, and the ramifications of that. I mean, bigots don't care. They don't care about the intricacies of the differences between your faith and mine, right? If they did, then they wouldn't be bigots to begin with, right? And they don't care, about the differences between gay rights and women's rights and Sikh rights. They don't care about those differences, right? They only care that we are different from them, and this feeling that especially white males in a down economy feel that somehow people of color are getting ahead. I mean, there's no evidence of that. Men of color make 80% make 80 cents of every dollar that white men make. Women of color make 60 cents on every dollar that white men make. So, there's no evidence of that at all, but that is the pervasive feeling, right? And I don't think that we're helping, I don't think it helps cause to put, the group that you need ally with, the groups that you need allies with on the defensive. I think we need to do a better job of including everyone and also being there for them, right? As these advocacy groups do their work, I see very little work on the behalf of other marginalized and equity-seeking groups as well.
So I think, Najib, part of, the conversation that I've been having is to try to give you give your viewers really context to, the Sikh story today or the Punjabi story today. And that's also to speak to ally groups as well, because the context of our story and I think for the Sikh community, we're especially in a unique position to now speak to our Muslim allies and organizations in terms of the struggles they face today, because it was the Sikh community, not too long ago was facing a similar attack. And let's not forget that, the first victim of a race-related attack after 9/11 was a Sikh man. And, I think that there is a greater conversation to be had between ally groups. There is, but what I've seen is I've seen work that is being done to try to build common cause. And maybe I'll cite a particular example. So in Ontario, the World Sikh Organization was able to partner with several other equity-seeking groups that included the NCCM, that included the Canadian Muslim Vote, that was also a Tamil group, that was also my understanding is a Black equity-seeking group as well, and they came together for an initiative called We Vote. And that was a nonpartisan initiative to try to encourage better voter turnout. And we started those efforts here in Alberta part of the last provincial election with some video campaigns that we had partnered with the Alberta Muslim Public Affairs Committee on similar things. And no doubt, as people who are in that space and are advocates in that space, there is a greater goal for us to build those relationships. But if you look at, I think from the perspective of the Sikh community, one of the issues we've always faced, and I think our community faces is we're isolated, right? We become isolated in our own silos, and a lot of that you can't put on the communities themselves, right? I don't like blaming communities for that, but it's a reality, right? I'll give you an example of the Nagar Kirtan, right? The Nagar Kirtan is the annual Sikh parade that happens across this country in different places. The Nagar Kirtan in Surrey attracts 500,000 plus people, which is massive. The parade here in Edmonton is probably one of the I think it's the third largest parade that happens in Edmonton, and yet if you look at it, politicians have come to understand the significance of this, so they're all there, and they want to have stage time and they want to be able to have the audience. But in terms of having allies attend, it's poor. Outreach efforts are made, but it's still considered, I think, a non-mainstream event. And yet, despite Sikhs being in this country over 100 years and doing their things for over 100 years, we are still viewed by many other communities as still being, an isolated group that.
That's a perfect example, Harman. Why should they come? Do we as Sikhs and Muslims go to gay rights parades, right? Do we go to women rights marches, right? So why should they come, right? I mean, this is the beauty.
But here's the thing.
I'm not, advocating, Bernie or any Democratic socialist. I don't want to get into that, but that's the beauty of Bernie, right? Is Bernie is so authentic, and no one can tear it down because it's not a facade. Bernie was there, for Black rights, and he was there for women's marches, and he was there for gay rights, right? Bernie's been there, so when it's his turn, that's why he is seeing such success from these groups, is because, this is the problem that I'm speaking to, is that we can't keep doing advocacy just alone for our groups and expect that our allies will show up when we don't show up for them.
So I think to push back on that, Najib, is, I can speak from the World Sikh Organization's perspective, which is when the issue around same-sex marriage had become and put forward to Parliament, we supported it. We supported same-sex marriage. We issued letters, press releases within our own community, publicly, to say that as a Sikh community, as a representative body of Canadian Sikhs, that we support this. That was a significant moment for our community. It's something that there was a small minority in our community that spoke out and felt that wasn't appropriate. But fast forward, many years, if you look at pride parades within Edmonton, they're now facing their own internal discussion and dialogue with groups of marginalized LGBTQ members who feel like they're not represented within the larger conversation of LGBT issues. So is it really the place for the Sikh community to kind of step in and have that, or allow them to be able to continue their advocacy, but to be able to support them and take positions on things like the
Well, I think what we can do, is we can show some vulnerability in our communities as well, right? And recognize the fact that, it's not just white people that have issues with gay rights and some of these other issues, right? I mean, we have, just as much issue in our communities with alcoholism, with mental illness, with the ostracization of the gay people in our communities, right? So I think that if we showed that we cared about these things within our community and not just about racism and all the platforms that we continually stand on, then maybe that would be a way that we can establish, a relationship and build bridges, right? So maybe instead of calling out every racist incident that happens, maybe we should also, when something happens in terms of in the LGBT community, we can also talk about those same issues in our communities. I think that's one step. I don't want to.
But I feel like so to some extent, I feel like that view is slightly myopic in the sense that when you do advocacy work, even whether that's on behalf of your community, there is an element of that work that lifts all boats, right? The work that groups did on issues of religious accommodation, whether that was the Sikh community with the Supreme Court decision of Multani, but that equally applies to people of the Muslim community and helping them in being accommodated in the workplace with their faith. And so it's not a zero-sum game when you do advocacy work. I think there's a way to amplify and there is a way to build allyship. But part of this is that you've been relegated, and the media in this country has relegated your issues to your community, right, as being unique to you. And that, I think, is what then perpetuates the silos, right? Within our own media sources and our own communities. There's an example that just from a few days ago, one of our local journalists in Edmonton tackled the issue of our relationship with LGBTQ members and the cultural compulsion that some of them felt to deny their own truth and to enter into marriages that were convenient to their parents. And he actually confronted this issue on a local media platform within the ethnic community. But what does this country say about media sources that are from diverse communities? That they don't matter. You're talking about media bailout in this country that is actually going to support the existing media landscape. Does it have space for ethnic and diverse voices? No. Is there any requirement of part of this bailout that the Liberals are proposing of hundreds of millions of dollars that would allow for new startups within our communities to explore these issues, to help speak to these issues? No, there's not. And are we now holding the Liberals to account? We should be, and we're not doing it strong enough. And this is where you look at how all of these issues have been framed in this country. I mean, if you look at CBC, which is our publicly funded broadcaster, they're at minimum, the CBC should be reflective of the diversity in this country because it is funded by all of us, and it's not.